letting you know it's 50 people look at you. It's, you guys say hello to each and every one of them, or they get pissed off because it's low, and I'm just like to switch it up every once in a while.
Yeah, I think we're going to start.
Okay.
Hey everybody.
Hey.
We are going to get started. Wow, does this seem as loud to you as it does to me? I'm not sure how we turn this thing down. I just think I have to step back a little bit. Welcome to our Northwest Wayne Fan December Public Forum. I think the attendance is a little bit sparse, which is a little unusual. I think that maybe the 275 construction coupled with the roads might have something to do with it, and we may see some people rolling in as we go, but I didn't want to wait much longer before we got things started. My name is Lauren Rousseau. I am the president of this fan chapter for one more month, after which I'm passing the scepter, the gavel. What do you put? It's not really a gavel. Passing the hat to Judge Laura Mack. She can raise her hand. Before we get started, I just want to say a couple things about FAN generally. For the couple of people here, wait, is there anybody here who doesn't know that much about FAN generally? I think most of you do. I see a couple new faces who may need a little bit of information. So Families Against Narcotics is an organization that started in 2008 in Macomb County. It's grown to have 20 chapters within the state of Michigan. The mission is to provide education, resources, and hope to individuals and families who are struggling with addiction. Each chapter does this in a variety of different ways. We basically are receptive to the needs of our community. There's one thing that we all do, and that is hold monthly public forums like this. And those public forums provide speakers and different types of education on the subject of addiction to the people who attend. Our fan chapter also provides a family support group, the Stronger Together support group for family and friends. That group meets twice a month on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. It's currently meeting online via Zoom, and there is a flyer over there on the literature table if you want more information regarding the time or how you want to connect with that. Also, if any of you are here for the first time and have not signed in on our little sign-in sheet there with your name and an email address, you might want to do that, because that will allow you to get our emails, which will tell you about upcoming events. It'll tell you what the topic is for each of our monthly public forums, which are the first Monday of every month. We also are, I don't know if I would say working with, partnering with, the New Hope Center for Grief Support. They provide resources to individuals who are struggling with grief as a result of loss of a loved one. In particular, they have programs for people who've lost a loved one as a result of addiction. They have a support group that meets the second Wednesday of every month at the New Hope's office in Northville at 7 p.m. And there's a flyer on the back table with more information regarding that monthly support meeting. They also have a memorial event coming up on December 13th, a memorial candlelight ceremony to remember lost loved ones, and that's happening at Ward Church in Northville at 7 p.m. That's not limited to having lost a loved one to substance use, but basically it's a program to remember any lost loved one, or anyone that you've lost for any reason, basically. Before I say anything more about that, I'm going to introduce Jan Wilson, give her an opportunity to say a few words about the program that New Hope Center for Grief Support has.
Hello, happy to be here. Yeah, like Lauren said, I am actually a volunteer with New Hope. I've been volunteering with them for 5 years now. I first came to New Hope for a workshop after I lost my son to a drug overdose. 4 months later, my husband to illness, and then about 16 months later, I lost my daughter to alcoholism. and I was really having a hard time dealing with my grief. So I attended a workshop at New Hope, and it pretty much transformed my life. Gave me a new purpose. And what I do now is facilitate at these workshops. I do some speaking for them, and I, in January of this past year, started an ongoing group for lost due to substance use. So that's what we do, and we have 2 8-week workshops a year, and they're they're on Monday nights at Ward Church. They start out with a speaker every week on a different topic due to the loss, and then we break out into groups based on type of loss. So we have spousal loss, parent loss, child loss, suicide loss, substance use loss, that's probably a pandemic loss we have now. So we have those usually, I think there's one starting in March, and then there's one in the fall. And then we have a lot of ongoing groups that meet throughout the year, monthly or bi-weekly. We also do a lot with kids. We have a family night once a month for parents and children who have lost someone. At our office, we feed them dinner, and then the kids go do their thing, and we work with the parents a little bit. And in the summer, we have a 2-day kids camp at Mayberry Farms in Northville, and it's just, it's a great thing. Last year, I think we had like 50 or 60 kids. New Hope's a nonprofit organization. We've been around for over 20 years, so we're very excited to work with FAN, and although what we do is not a happy thing, and we're sad usually for the reason that people are there, it's tragic and it's growing, and that's not good, but there is a need, and I think there's especially a need for people who lose someone to drugs, alcohol. There's a lot building up to that. There's not just the actual death. There's a whole lot that comes before that, and a lot of feelings of guilt and remorse, and people feel that they could have done more. So, thank you very much for listening. And there's brochures on the back table if anyone's interested in picking something up afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jan. I also want to say a big thank you to our monthly food sponsor. So Skywood Recovery, hugely grateful for them for supporting us over the time that we've existed. They've always been supportive of us in providing food for our public forums. And as well, Canton Sweetwater's Coffee and Tea provides the coffee that you see over there as well. So a huge thank you to them as well. All right, so tonight we have a really inspirational program, and as I'm glad you're all here to hear our speakers. Although as it turns out we have one speaker because one of our speakers unfortunately wasn't able to make it. But I think that Aaron is going to be able to carry the day. I see him in the back over there. So let me say a few words about Aaron Suganuma. And he's going to take over and speak in a few minutes. Once he's done speaking, there'll be an opportunity for any of you to ask questions or make comments. So Aaron is currently the reentry coordinator for the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. He's worked as a substance abuse counselor in residential, outpatient, and prison-based settings. He was a co-founder of 2 nonprofit organizations that you're going to hear more about in just a minute, A Brighter Way and Nation Outside. Both of these organizations focus on supporting the reentry to society of formerly incarcerated individuals and on criminal justice reform. Aaron's actively engaged in direct service and advocacy efforts related to criminal justice. He holds a master's degree in social work from Eastern Michigan University and completed his associate's degree while serving 4.5 years in prison. He's passionate about helping people find their freedom from incarceration and substance use disorder through policy, community organizing, and individual work. Would you all please welcome Aaron Suganuma?
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Aaron.
Oh man, this microphone's like an HD. This is amazing. How's it going, everybody?
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for asking me to do this, Sam, and for providing a warm welcome, Lauren and Darla. I think I'm nervous. And I also need to say that, for what it's worth, this is a big night. This is my first night out in 5 months. We've got a little one at home, so I don't have to be home till 9. So let's hang out. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited that you're here and to hear a little bit about what brings people here, and I'm really curious about some of the stories that are behind everybody and what brings you here. And so I'll share a little bit about this, about some the stuff that I've got going on and how we got here. But really, I think that this is a powerful room. It's my understanding. It sounds like there tends to be more people in the room and that kind of thing. I've seen the slush coming down, and I don't know. I've been like burying my head and like trying to play silly when it comes to my weather apps, and so I'm just whatever comes, it comes. It's in rooms like this that we find a lot of solution, that we start to connect, and that we start to break down some of the stigma and the shame and the things that make this world feel impossible to navigate. As was alluded to in the intro, I've got a little bit of experience with that. So I'm a person in long-term recovery from opioid addiction. I've got almost 14 and a half years. 14 years anyway, and that wasn't the plan, but I'm grateful to have gotten this far. Longer story short, I'm originally from Hawaii, from a middle-class background. Mother was in academia, father was a federal worker. And so, the way that I was raised was to, be proud of your family, to be proud of the country that we live in, and the ideals that we all aspire to, and that we, aspire to as individuals, as citizens, and as family members. But one of the things that happened for me, and I can point to a few maybe instances along the road, I started feeling more and more separate, and more other. And one of the things that did happen is that my parents, I don't know if they ever got along. Supposedly, maybe. I didn't see it, but there's pictures. There was a lot of trouble at home and that kind of fun stuff, and I'm not going to go into all the gory details other than to say, I started having behavioral issues at a young age, and I know that, I'm not sure about my dad, but I know that my mom just really struggled to find support. She was having, she had her own professional aspirations going on, but she also had, was trying to figure out how to, support this young person, like 5, 6 years old, like getting kicked out of like summer schools and expelled from, I think I got expelled from kindergarten. I was just having a lot of behavioral issues. And I know that early on, like for instance, I got put on a medication for attention deficit disorder. And, for me, that was one of these things that I remember throwing an absolute fit in this doctor's office because I didn't want to be diagnosed with something. I didn't want to be given a medication. To me, that meant if I'm getting a medication, there's something wrong with me, and I can't function as a normal person without it. But regardless, I ended up, like I'm 5. What am I going to do? I've got to eat. Like I don't have like, determination. You know what I mean? So. Growing up was interesting. The behavioral issues didn't necessarily go away for a long time. And eventually we moved to Michigan, and I ended up getting into substances. I found a lot of my identity in substances, found a lot of connection to other people. Even before I started using, I found that I was hanging out with a lot of other people who came from, divorced backgrounds and who were just similarly kind of struggling. I'm looking for my tribe. I'm looking for connection, and I think that one of the other things that I think about it too, with a little bit of more reflection, is if I can think about it from this early age that I aspired to certain ideals, and I found myself farther and farther, like those ideals seemed so impossible. It's like, well, those rules don't apply to me. I'm gonna hang out, and abide by these other rules, because this is more kind of like my lane. I can find my people here, I can find connection here, and there's opportunity. Anyway, so yeah, I started getting into some legal trouble early on, selling some things, and just getting caught with things, and that was just a part of my identity. So. A couple things. One is, while that was a part of my identity, I didn't necessarily love it. Like I found that, I did find a certain tribe, but it wasn't necessarily a tribe that I was like fully proud of. We had our connections, but I wasn't like, man, this is awesome. This is all I want to do for the rest of my life, And I also saw the struggle that, my mom went through, and the things that clearly she wasn't talking to the rest of her family about, that I was going through. But I would still, at least for a time, be able to go out of state to family functions and that kind of fun stuff to be able to put on a good face. And to be honest, I think that was one of the hardest things for me is seeing what I put my mom through and I think that it continues to be one of my motivators. So, longer story short, I went to, gosh, I could talk for a while. I've got a lot of time here, don't I?
You do.
Jeez. What time should I be quiet?
Just keep talking, you got
Yeah.
the floor.
Yep, that's right, you got the
You
floor.
guys are wild. All right. Okay. So longer story short, yeah, I did a lot of drugs. I sold a lot of drugs, and that was my identity. And when I say, I'll be more specific. It's 2021. I don't even know what that even means now. So I'll define it in like 1990s and like early 2000s terminology. So what that means is I sold a lot of like weed and those kinds of things. And that really was, that was my identity. And for better or worse, like I was the guy who like in like 6th or 7th grade was like reading books like The Emperor Has No Clothes and writing book reports about why marijuana should be legal and all that kind of fun stuff. I was that guy. My hair was like down to here. It was awesome. While coming back to this theme of kind of like living dual roles, on the one hand, I was selling a little bit of weed here and there, but I was also doing my best to try to continue to get acceptable or passable grades, and to be able to participate in a way that I thought would eventually be able to like honor my family, be able to do some kind of like full circle thing. longer story short, again, this is a situation where I saw this ideal and this thing that I told myself I'd be able to do, and I started getting farther and farther away from it. After I graduated from high school, I decided to take a gap year, I think. I think that's how it worked out. I don't remember what my transcript says, but that was my plan. I wanted to take a gap year, probably, community college before I went somewhere like Columbia University or something like that. My GPA was like 1.6. I think that I tell elements of this story partially for like a little bit of levity and comedic relief, but also to kind of just say like throughout a lot of the struggle, I saw what it did to my mom. And because this is families against, families against narcotics, it's just, it just keeps coming back to the role that ended up playing in my eventual recovery, in story along the way. And again, coming back to like knowing how desperately my mom like reached out and was like looking around for support, and seeing what it did to her emotionally. So I didn't go to Columbia University. I was going to go for journalism too, by the way. And for what it's worth, I still think it's amazing, but I'm glad that I didn't do it. Because I can just blog now and post things on Facebook. And anyway. So I'm a couple years out of high school. I end up getting into some significant trouble with an organization called LawNet, and was put on felony probation for distribution of substances. And I'll skip some of the gory details, but longer story short, I was able to continue like smoking weed and all kinds of fun stuff throughout my probation. And at the very end, I celebrated getting off of probation by starting to do heroin. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. It was just the next logical thing. And this was a spot where I found myself in a spot where I had a lot of money saved up and was able to use without consequence very heavily, for something like a year before anybody figured it out. But then after the money ran out, clearly, like, you can't hide a habit like that. I was using something like a gram and a half or 2 grams a day. And anyway, I struggled going in and out of detoxes and fun stuff like that, and eventually ended up going to prison for armed robbery in 2004. And so it was a really interesting spot for me, because up to that point, I'd always been able to leave wherever I was at. I wasn't ever kept in jail for a significant amount of time. This was the first time that I was put in jail, had to detox all the way through, and it didn't matter what I said to anybody. I couldn't manipulate a counselor or anything like that to release me for the holidays or whatever else. For some reason, they wanted to keep me there. And, while at first, this little blip I think is important. I was at a spot where I had always had these ideals of myself, been able to maintain some degree of hope with my family. And like any time that I'd be in treatment or trouble or anything like that, I was able to kind of like talk my way out of it. And this was the first time that I realized that if a miracle was pulled, I could probably make bail. But in the back of my head, I knew that if I did, I'd just go back to using. Like I just knew it. And so, it's one of the first times that I remember really being honest with myself about my addiction. And I just kind of, I don't know. I just kind of wrote it out and kind of just sat back with that knowledge, realizing like, this incarceration might be the thing that saved my life. I don't know that I felt that way when they passed a piece of paper under the door that said that I I was facing a maximum life sentence. That was that was something else. But you know, again, you know, it was a spot where I was given the opportunity to really face the gravity of the life that I was living, the consequences of what I had done, and really came to terms with how I'd been living and the impact that it had on other people. Because there was no, you know, we're going to do better tomorrow kind of thing. So, you know, I think that a lot of that was much more in depth than I planned on sharing tonight. You know, but I wanted to share pieces of that because it really informs a lot of the work that I do today. Just a longer story short, you know, I ended up being sentenced to 51 months in the Department of Corrections, and a couple of things stood out to me. One was, at the time anyway, substance abuse treatment was very optional and essentially looked like you're going to take substance abuse 1 or substance abuse 2, and you're going to get a packet or 2, and they're going to be copies of copies and copies, and you can see where all the staples used to be, where they copied them, and you know, and then you know, somebody would talk, and they clearly had no idea what they were talking about, and it's just like, what are we here for? But at the end, you get the little certificate, and that looks good for the parole board. So good, get out of here. You know, so. I just remember just feeling really disappointed by that. And I would look around and think about, especially the folks who helped me to turn my life around, who kind of took some time with me to say, hey, like, I was 22, you know, in a level 2 prison, you know, with a bunch of people doing like life and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And I got really lucky. You know, I think that a lot of young people get in there and they really start cutting up and getting in trouble and all kinds of fun stuff, gambling, doing lots of drugs. And I'm not going to say that I didn't do some of that stuff, but I had people take me under their wing really early on and just say, like, here's how to, you know, like, I see you got a good head on your shoulders, like, here's how to stay out of trouble, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, without some of those early conversations with people that to this day I have no idea why they talk to me. Do you know how many Asian people there are in prison in Michigan? Like 5. I don't know. It might be 10. But it's not very many more. But they did. They reached out to me and they showed me how to jail. And one of the things that did a lot of things for me. Among them, it gave me enough of a stable perspective to be able to, again, be more reflective of the actions that I was taking and how they might affect me for the long term. But then it also, and this is the bigger thing I think for me, it had me looking around the carceral system and just saying, like, why are we here? Like, here are these 2 people. One of them is a juvenile lifer. He's a guy who was sentenced to life in prison for something he did when he was like 17. He's never getting out, you know, but he's in here doing tons of good work with all kinds of people. Like, why are we warehousing people? Like, the government is funding people to the tune of like $34,000 a year minimum to just warehouse them for what? This is a person who's, you know, got a family, got hopes, dreams, all that kind of fun stuff. If he gets out tomorrow, or maybe in a couple weeks or months, probably be okay. You know, and so that was one thing that I looked at. The other thing that I looked at was a lot of people who, like, systemically, people from Detroit, from, well, now Ipsy, I know, you know, Flint, Grand Rapids, especially those centers. I mean, Benton Harbor, oh my gosh. So, I mean, people who systematically, if you look at the school systems, if you look at the neighborhoods, all this kind of stuff, the water, all this kind of stuff, it was the decks are stacked against them, you know. And for me, I think there was a lot of off-ramps in the criminal justice system and in other interventions in my life where something could have happened and I could have gone another way. You know, and so there's different ways that the system may or may not have failed me, but the system clearly it could be a lot better for some of these other communities. You know, and one of the things that I had in the back of my, and that was just infuriating, because it's not just these individuals, but you hear them talking about their parents going through it, and their grandparents going through it, and there's no reason to believe that their kids aren't going through it right now, right? And so, in the back of my head, I had this crazy idea that if I ever had the chance, I'd like to do something about this. I didn't know what that might be, but, you know, fast forward, I was able to get into, I ended up doing 4.5 years. I went into Dawn Farm Transitional Housing. It was one of these things that I told the parole board, "Can y'all do that? Let me out." I couldn't do that. That's crazy. Why would you go from like being incarcerated to a place where you act, you know, they're gonna, I didn't know this, they're gonna tell you to make your bed. They're gonna tell you to like be in by like 9:30 or like 11 o'clock on the weekends. Like, that's crazy. Best thing for me. It was the best thing for me. You know, it was, you know, I ended up being in a spot where I got very lucky. Couple things. Before I got there, the day I got out, I had this plan that I told the parole board, and I told a lot of people in my history, right, I'm gonna do a lot of things. Found another way. Didn't work out so well, you know, and so I'll always remember driving down 23 with my mom, who picked me up from Ionia, and as we started going by like places like Brighton, you know, like looking over and remembering when I was at Brighton Hospital, and how that essentially I relapsed as soon as I got back to my car. And I just, you know, all the sensory memories started coming back. I started smelling, you know, like Livingston and Washtenaw County, you know. I mean, things smell different. Things, you know, color contrast look different. And sensory memories are closely related in the parts of our brain that, you know, are just associated with trauma and substance use disorder, right? So a lot of that stuff starts flooding back, and I just remember starting to feel flooded and overwhelmed and thinking like, this is going to be really hard. This is crazy, you know. And so that was another one of these moments that kind of like crystallized, like, I need help, but I don't know how to get it. So in a similar kind of way to like what my mom was in, like knowing that I needed help but not knowing where to go, I think that I found a little bit of willingness. And I'll say this, after we came down to Ann Arbor, we went to the parole office, and you know, to this point, really the only people who had supported me was like my mom and a couple old friends who were using buddies, really. You know, and so when I got to the parole office, I met up with people from Michigan Prisoner Reentry. You gotta plug this, right? And these were the first people who were nice to me and who were supportive of me, other than my mom, which blew my mind. And Sam was one of those people, right? So like Sam was the person who took me to DHS and helped me to get like food stamps and get on Medicaid and things like that. And she was like one of those first few people who, I don't know if that's like even like a blip on her radar, but it was one of these things that was just huge to me, you know, in my journey. Here's this person taking time out and just being nice. Oh my gosh, you know? So, thank you, Sam.
What you did with it.
So, so I ended up going to Dawn Farm Transitional Housing and getting into 12-step recovery, and you know, getting a sponsor, doing the deal, and all that kind of fun stuff. And I don't need to say a lot about that kind of thing, other than, you know, what I've learned and what I've continued to try to do is to say, you know, whatever worked then should continue to work, and I just try to keep building that foundation, right? And keep that going. So eventually I was able to go back to school for social work, and experienced a lot of barriers just in terms of, just throwing some, it's hard to get a job. It's hard to go back to school if you've got a criminal record, especially a criminal record like mine. I've got drug crimes, but I've also got, a capital offense, armed robbery on my record. It's hard to find a place to live. There's a lot of just opportunities for the system that I've always hoped to be able to participate in. There's a lot of opportunities for the system to exclude me. And so, eventually I did, I went back to school I got a job at a local deli. I worked there for a long time. I went back to school for social work. While I was there, I started interning at Dawn Farm. Eventually was able to start running developing and running a wellness and recovery group, doing a smoking cessation group that helped me quit smoking finally for like the 6th time.
Yeah.
I started facilitating this group, and like while I was training to do it, was like running me back in the dumpster. And the client saw me and just like, "What are you doing?" Oh, all right. Yep, getting honest. Anyway, so but it worked. So stuff like that was great. Just like learning how to kind of shift from, I skipped over kind of a lot of that early recovery stuff, but starting to shift over into a more structured role as a helper was really cool, and then starting to continue to develop that identity has been an interesting one, a really empowering one. And one of the fun things that I do get to see is a lot of other people in recovery joining the ranks of social work and the helping professions as well. It's really cool stuff. So, longer story short, so I went from my bachelor's to my master's program, and one of the things, and with the intention of being a substance abuse counselor, but one of the things that I ended up finding was that there are a lot of great substance abuse counselors out there. But I kept seeing people who were getting out of jail and getting out of prison, and they just kept struggling and struggling and struggling, right? Because one of the things that I ended up finding the full story is this, actually. I'm doing my thing, and when I hear somebody at a meeting who says they were just in jail or in prison, my ears perk up, and I go talk to them, and I get some of my other buddies who have also been locked up, and we just go talk to the person, right? Well, one of the things that we find is that a lot of people would just end up falling through the cracks, and that also applies to one of my good buddies who I was incarcerated with, who helped to get me on track, who when he got out, he said, I tried going to NA and I tried doing this other stuff. Man, I don't have an addiction problem, so I don't know where to get support. And one of the things I ended up realizing, all right, chronologically, the way that this happened was, I had a buddy named Rory Crook and another friend named Melvin Parson. We all got together and we said, hey, what can we do to help support formerly incarcerated people transitioning out? It seems like AA alone isn't working for folks, and counseling and all these other things just aren't working for folks. What can we do? And longer story short, we ended up forming an organization called The Right Way. And one of the premises to that is to recognize that almost everybody transitioning out wants to do something better. Almost everybody incarcerated wants to do something better. We don't want to feel good about ourselves. We all want to feel connection and feel a sense of tribe. But the traditional places where people tend to get support when they're transferring out are either through the religious community or through family or through a specialized program. They'll have their sex, even saying the name of a sex offenders program or something like that. Who wants to go to a sex offenders program? It's in the name, it doesn't sound good, right? Religion can be great, but it's exclusive. Families can be great, but those, like a supportive family can be great, but even in a supportive family, people don't always necessarily feel comfortable talking about everything, right? And so our goal was to form an organization that would help support people regardless of what they're coming in with. You can believe anything, you don't have to be on probation, parole, or anything like that. You can be a man, woman, anything between, as long as you want to talk to us, like let's hang out and figure some stuff out. So we ended up forming a Brighter Way together, just meeting back in 2015. And so I graduated with my MSW in 2015, started a Brighter Way with Melvin and Rory in 2015. And at the same time, I don't know how much I'll talk. Well, you guys want to hear about policy stuff too? You do? Okay. So, all right, so I'm working at Dawn Farm, doing a Brighter Way, starting to transition out of Dawn Farm. We started a Brighter Way, and then I also, Melvin tricks me into going to this meeting up in Lansing. And I'm like, what's all this about? He's just like, I don't know. They're called Nation Outside. I don't know what it is. This Michigan collaboration and mass incarceration. I'm like, all right, that sounds amazing. Like, let's check it out. Anyway, so I ended up getting, yeah, it is what it is. I ended up getting tricked into coordinating this group called Nation Outside, which ended up being one of the most amazing and fantastic experiences. The longer story short is similar to the impetus for starting a Brighter Way. Here's this issue that's not being addressed. One of the things that we tend to see is who passes laws? Who sets policy? Right? Where is it set? Right? People tend to think of it as being set in Washington, D.C., set in Lansing, other state capitals around the country, maybe in City Hall. And that would be true, but it's also set locally. Because those people in Lansing, those people at City Hall, and those people in D.C. aren't going to feel comfortable passing new laws and making different movement if they don't know that they have the support of the people in the community behind them, right? So longer story short, the idea behind Nation Outside is a couple things. It's primarily to elevate the voice of formerly incarcerated people to the policy-making table. With the basic idea of, and this is not my quote, but those closest to the solution are often those closest from power and resources. So what can we do to better network and better make sure that impacted people are at the right tables to inform discussions or to lead discussions around policy. And so that was an amazing group and continues to be an amazing group. Essentially, so whereas a Brighter Way was specific to Washtenaw County in supporting men and women returning to incarceration, specifically to Washtenaw County, Nation Outside is a statewide organization. It's got membership even in, from every corner essentially. I don't know about Iron River, but just about everywhere, and so I'm not sure about the current model for it, but I'm pretty sure, yeah. So there's a Detroit chapter right now, there's a Jackson chapter, there's definitely a base in Lansing and a lot of interest in Washtenaw County, but there's statewide membership. And as a matter of fact, I've got one of their flyers right in front of me. So right now, some of the policy pushes that they're going for is fair chance housing, voting rights, second chance employment, and civic engagement. I'm going to highlight that civic engagement piece because similar to addiction, similar to some of the things that I talked about, a lot of people feel disenfranchised. They feel like their voice doesn't matter. They feel like disconnected, and they feel like that world is just that. It's that world. It doesn't apply to me. But what does it look like when a person starts taking ownership of their lives, their families, and their communities, right? And the policies that dictate them. A couple things. One, and the biggest one, right, is sense of purpose. And it is. It's just that. It's ownership. So you're not only taking better care of yourself, you're taking better care of your family, you're taking better care of your community, and bringing more people into the fold. So that's something that we've got retooling and kind of going throughout the state right now. They've got a fantastic, Nation Outside has a fantastic coordinator right now named Ashley Golden. If anybody's interested in connecting with her and Nation Outside to talk about what that might look like, or if you want to volunteer or just get on the mailing list or anything like that, you can find more information on them at nationoutside.org. All right. A couple more things when it comes to policy. So I'm going to give you some for instances when it comes to some of the work that Nation Outside worked on, just real quick. One thing is the way that my experience helps to inform the work that I do now and the approach that I have to it. We organize with Nation Outside and several other organizations, including what's now Safe and Just Michigan, to repeal a law so that now formerly incarcerated people and people with felonies can be hired by the Department of Corrections to provide services. So simple stuff like that. Nation Outside has also been in support of and helped to organize throughout the state for a clean slate and expansion of expungement. So for people who haven't heard about that, traditionally you could only get one felony and 2 misdemeanors, but now I think it's unlimited misdemeanors as long as they're nonviolent, and up to 4, I think it's 3 felonies as long as they're nonviolent. The other big thing when it comes to those laws is the clean slate component, which automates the process, meaning that a person, I think it's 96% of people who were eligible under the former laws for expungement didn't actually end up going through the process because it was too complicated and too costly. This is going to make it automatic after 10 years, and Michigan is going to be the first state to be able to do that for people with felonies. All right, moving on. So, A Brighter Way, awesome organization. Last year helped to create a partnership with Eastern Michigan University to create the Returning Citizens Fellowship Program. So they're supporting people who are formerly incarcerated and enrolled at Eastern Michigan University, and creating scholarship opportunities for people there. I don't know, exciting stuff. I've got more. Should I keep talking? I can stop.
Well, do you want to, are there any questions maybe or that people might have before you continue on? Just if you want to take a break for a second and see if anyone has any questions about anything. Okay, nobody's raising their hand. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Yep.
How was A Brighter Way funded?
Yes, that's a great question. So it's through a mixture of grants and private donations. One of the things that we tend to find, like a lot of nonprofit organizations, that it's hard to get off the ground in terms of getting grants until you have a certain amount of 990s and a certain track record. But now they're in a position with 5 years of experience to be able to get decent sized grants.
And how do you get referrals? People, how do they know about you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Stuff like this, word of mouth, and partnerships like the Returning Citizens Fellowship with Eastern Michigan University. There's also another partnership with Recycle Ann Arbor, where Recycle Ann Arbor is hiring formerly incarcerated people who are getting mentoring. There's also another project that sounds pretty exciting, which is a partnership with a local housing provider to be able to provide support for people in housing. And then, as long as we're doing good work, the local parole offices have been really supportive of A Brighter Way as well. So previous to the pandemic, we were actually able to, when I was there, we were able to go into the parole office. So prior to a person being released, we'd be able to meet with them as part of the pre-planning.
So, do you know if are there organizations similar to Brighter Way, or that have the same mission in other counties? And are you aware of that? And second question to that is Brighter Way considering expanding into other counties?
Yeah, those are great questions. So, director, Adam Sheldon Grant, who would be fantastic. I've got his contact information here as well. And, you know, I don't sit on the board, you know, I'm not, you know, making decisions there. But I will say that in the past, that has been discussed. You know, it just depends what that kind of looks like. In terms of other organizations that look like a Brighter Way, one of the things that is unique to a Brighter Way is that it's not it's not attached to another nonprofit or a church. One of the things that we found when we were looking at different grants for mentoring at the time, I think that the landscape has changed, especially in the last couple of years. The Michigan Department of Corrections has actually built mentoring into their strategic plan. So ideally, they are funding it. But mentoring programs tend to get run out of churches. And so inherently, they're going to have a certain amount of religiosity built into the curriculum, which is something that a Brighter Way is intentionally not discouraged, certainly not. You know, we want people to build connections, as many connections as they can, but we don't want to make it an exclusive factor. So some of the coolest organizations that I know, like the Fresh Coast Alliance, like out of Muskegon. I mean, there are some tremendous mentoring programs.
So do you do individual, group mentorship, both? I mean, do you have meetings that people will attend?
A Brighter Way right now has just been doing one-on-one. I was working on a partnership that would have done group mentoring just before I left, and I know that the person who took over now is really interested in doing groups. I'm a fan, personally. I mean, there's power in groups, right? Social learning. So.
What about programs in the prisons? Is there any thought of having, you know, I think I know prisons cut back on a lot of programs. I know they used to be able to get college degrees, and then that was eliminated in budget cuts. Does your group advocate for more educational opportunities in prison? And like you said, they're warehousing people, and why not try to help them while they're there?
Yeah, so I can't speak with absolute authority on this, but I know that DOC, like many other institutions, really limited the amount of people who were going in and out of their facilities during COVID. But I know that, you know, organizations like Chance for Life are very active in supporting mentoring type programs for people on the inside. And there are a couple other ones, you know, smaller ones, but the biggest one is Chance for Life. In terms of education for people in there, I know that a lot of people are working with, I think it's Calvin College and Jackson Community College. I actually think that Pell Grants have been reinstated. I've got a friend who works at the Vera Institute for Justice, Alan Wachendorfer, who I believe is back to overseeing Michigan and the intentional expansion of post-secondary education in DOC and access to it. So it's certainly it's another one of these things where the more that out here, it's hard enough to learn that certain things exist. Like in there, people don't have like the internet, you know? And so it's another one of these opportunities where education and just knowing something is, you know, is so important. Like voting, I didn't say this earlier, but a lot of people think that formerly incarcerated people can't vote, and it's not the case. That's only the case in like 2 states in the country. Should I say anything about the sheriff's office?
I got a quick question. Who pays for that education in prison?
So, so when I was, like, for instance, like I took classes at Washington Community College, that was self-pay. So, I mean, a little bit of it came from what I was making, breaking leaves or whatever I was doing in there. But my mom was paying for it. I'm not sure about student loans, but I know that people are getting education through like Pell Grants. So that's federal funding.
Could you? Oh, go ahead. Oh, when you have a moment, if you could talk a little bit about the sheriff and how they could, if they're supporting this sort of activity, that would be interesting to me. Thank you.
I'll get there. I rambled on about some of this other stuff longer than expected, but I will.
I'm just gonna say, if a person is gonna be released from prison, does the Department of Corrections, my experience with my daughter getting out of jails was basically getting your clothes back and you go. Do they sit with your program, some of these programs, do they sit down and tell the person that's getting released, hey look, you're gonna need support, you need help, here's 5 places, call. Do they do that? Or do they just say, hey, get out of here? They say just get out of here?
I don't even think they say that.
They usually don't, but that to me would be a great idea. I mean, to let these people know that there is help out there, like in Fan,
Yeah, so, a couple things. One is, I know that over the past 10 years or so, the Department of Corrections, from at the prison level, has been getting a lot better at that kind of thing. And I think that there's a thought that what happens at the federal level will trickle down to the state will trickle down to counties. But, so the state program, generally speaking, is called Offender Success. Department of Corrections has been, rolling that out a lot and doing a lot of pre-release programming. And then ideally, there is some degree of programming and support for people out in the community. But I think there's a lot of challenges to that, especially during COVID. A lot of those meetings are happening via Zoom. And I don't know if anybody's getting out of prison or jail, but prison especially, no one's handing you a phone. So a lot of people are, a lot of folks I know have actually never met their officers before.
Part of the program, fans called Come Back Team. So we go out and help people that are issue with a substance or use disorder. And they just set up a Michigan Department of Corrections to have a PO come with us once a month. And we actually go and discuss resources with that PO parolee. If, unfortunately, they've had an issue with substance use disorder after incarceration. So that's kind of the only time they really hear about this. Unfortunately, at this point that I'm there. So.
And that's just in Macomb.
No, it's open to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do it. I'm with Fan.
I know.
The comeback team is in 38 cities right now, across all the way up into here, and that's the Michigan Department of Corrections has approved it. It's getting the POs to work with us. So when you have a PO, when you get the opportunity to explain to them programs that are available, that usually kind of networks out. And I've been watching that happen. But it's brand new. It's only about a month old.
Yeah.
It's a great experience with us, and I will be with the PO.
Thanks for sharing that. But your name again is?
I'm Don Shadar.
Yes, he's one of the peer recovery coaches for FAM.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity for that. I think this is a spot where a lot of the, almost everybody's understaffed and overworked. And one of the things that I think was a commitment was to start to rebrand parole officers as kind of like reentry specialists or coaches to a certain degree. It's good culturally. I think not make up there. But that's certainly a push, and something like that can be an opportunity to say, well, okay, we don't even have to put this together. Fans can come to us and say, well, here's these resources you can help plug into. I think that there's, like our experience with the Brighter Way, we were surprised when we just approached the parole office and said, like, here's what we're providing, and they were like, you want to help our people? Great,
Not only a rebranding of the parole officer's role, but also the police officer's role in the community.
Yep.
Because when we approached the door, we're there with resources, and immediately, we had a guy jump out of the window that day. They immediately back up, but once you explain to them what our purpose is, and what I began to see is the PO that Twisted when we worked with the instigator out of Oakland, she started to spread it throughout, and I agree with you, they need to remake, because to most people, that as you're aware, the PO is not a fatality, it's not. So and that's the change that needs to, in the whole conversation, and I'm excited to see it. And I know Oakland and Macomb County have no internal programs at this point, I'm not sure when. And we can't even revive them.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Connect with me after the meeting. Might be able to help make some connections to help there.
Well,
Yeah, so reentry is a challenge, and so whether it's at the state level or the county level, which is a county by county kind of thing, I think that it's an opportunity where, the community can, the voices get loud enough. I have to believe, that the powers that be that are at the end of the day paid by the taxpayer, will listen to say, hey, the community's ready to support, here's the resources that we're putting together. Maybe that's a little idealistic or optimistic, you know what I mean? But you don't change unless you're willing to be a little audacious in that hope, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, that's the paradigm shift. We're trying to get away from just warehousing people and just opening the door literally. And so I was hired on, I don't speak for the sheriff's office, I'm not a representative, I can just speak a little bit about some of the work that I'm working on here. So I was hired as the first reentry coordinator at the sheriff's office. It's an exciting spot, particularly from the perspective of the best kind of prison reentry to do is the kind of work that prevents people from, or reduces the chance of people going to prison in the first place. And then being able to, talk to people like, if you're working with people getting out of prison, like the youngest they're going to be is like 19, 20, 21, something like that. In this role, I can work with people when they're like 17, 18 on the front end, you know what I mean? It's really cool. Unfortunately, sometimes even younger than that. But longer story short, the vision behind the reentry services at the Washington County Sheriff's Office is to bring on case managers and peers. Those are people who are either formerly incarcerated or people deeply rooted in the community to connect with people essentially from the time that they're incarcerated and for a certain subset through screens and assessments and all kinds of fun stuff that we've got in place. We'll be able to help support people out in the community for up to a year. Because a lot of people will tend to, it's not, I had bronchitis last week. And a million tests. Oh, okay, like a half dozen tests. Traditionally what tends to happen, right, is a person might start to think, oh man, like, why am I here, blah, 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 blah. But once they realize, well, I'm in jail again, I'm in this spot, I know what to expect, nothing, and I know what's going to be waiting for me when I get out, whatever. One of the other things that, whether it's the jail level or the prison level, I think that people will see is like, people when they're incarcerated will say that they will do X, X, and Y. But when they get out, what happens? The trauma takes over, the sensory memories take over, the crazy hill that they have to climb to actually make a difference in their lives is so tall. They're just like, man, again, I don't want to feel incompetent, right? So I'm going to go back to what I know. I'm going to go back to the relationships that I know, or whatever it is. And so, our team is tasked with connecting with people to start making some intentional plans and putting together the resources that will help to aid people in their long-term success, right? And what's really cool about it is that it's not just working with those individuals, but it's working with the county partners and the community, the entities throughout the community to put together like a whole set of resources. I was really inspired by a meeting that we had last week, actually a couple of meetings, but one of them is a partnership between the Public Defender's Office and the Prosecutor's Office to house what used to be the community co-chairship of offender success, so Michigan Department of Corrections. But what this stakeholders meeting is essentially doing is bringing together stakeholders in the reentry field that will centralize the resources for both prison and jail reentry to build better systems and partnerships with each other. So now, as opposed to every organization, this was the meeting last week, as opposed to every organization creating their own list, resource list, create all their own little connections and all that kind of stuff, we're just going to do that centrally. So that's going to save volunteer time, it's going to save staff time, it's going to help people to point in the right direction when one resource doesn't work anymore. We'll be able to take it off so we're not sending people to dead ends anymore. It's just a cool example of, honestly, years of work in trying to bring people together to build better systems to support people. I guess I'll just say a couple other things. The Washington County Jail. So in my role, I'm the reentry coordinator, so I oversee the case management team, but I also oversee the implementation of programming, whether it's education, whether it's substance use programming, whether it's MRT or whatever. You name the program, and I oversee the implementation of it in the jail. And so it's being the direct contact to all the different providers, making sure that, for instance, if a person stops participating in class, that we can follow up with them and just kind of see what's going on with them and that kind of fun stuff to keep people engaged. And then, I think that the other thing that I might throw out there too is last fall we started a MOUD program in the jail. So that started off with, so we're details. So that's another thing we're provided in the jail. To be honest, I was in all-day training today, but I was able to get a waiver so that we've got a guy who's going to get out. Hopefully he got out today. He might get out first thing in the morning, but we want to make sure that he's got the right authorizations so that he can continue his care out in the community. But all right, I've rattled on a whole bunch. What do you guys want to talk about?
There's a question over there.
Yeah, is there something really specific? Can we touch base on the way out and when you're done?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions for Aaron? All right, Aaron, that was amazing. Thank you so much for